G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today we're breaking from the usual format and speaking with a subject matter expert on pricing. I'm interviewing Christoph Petzoldt from Simon-Kucher. Thanks for your time today, Chris.
Thanks, Troy.
Now, I looked up your firm, Simon-Kucher, founded at the mid-'80s in Germany. You've got about 1,400 staff from what Wikipedia tells me. And you guys are widely regarded as experts in pricing, one of the world-leading firms. Have I got that right?
Yeah, you've got that exactly right.
Great. We'll start with how we know each other. James Baker here in Hobart, who came along to one of the monthly beer meetups that I host, suggested that we get you on to speak at the next monthly beer meetup on smart pricing, which we had you on Zoom there because you're based in Sydney, and we had 30 or 40 people in the room, very, very interested in this topic and some good questions. So that's how we know each other.
Yeah, thanks for having me at the time. So of course it would be always nice to do that in person, but
especially it's because it was at a brewery. Yeah,
exactly.
You can have a beer. Yeah.
You can read between the lines.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your background and experience. Industries worked in that you guys work with, brands, etc., and also how people can get in touch.
Yeah. So I'm already 20 years with Simon-Kucher, which is far too long for any consulting gig. It's actually this week is my 20th anniversary. So
congratulations.
When I saw that, I don't know if that's a good or a bad sign. But
that is a long time in consulting. Yeah.
It's a long time in consulting. And I think it's almost, you count it like dog years. So it must be then 140 years of experience or something.
Yeah.
I started in the head office in Germany and then was running mainly telecoms and media all over Asia and Middle East before opening the office in Australia in 2011. And here in Australia, we cover actually all industries, probably outside of pharmaceuticals, because that's a too specialized sector. But we've done stuff from base materials to retail, consumer goods, gig economy. We had a project for Racing Victoria on horse races. So
wow.
The type of how to make revenue improvements through better pricing or better product decisions, I think is independent of the industry.
Yep.
When it comes to the customers we work with here, again, it has been startups who didn't even launch any products yet, who wanted to set out on the right course from the get-go, all the way up to ASX 50 companies.
Yep.
And probably some local heroes in the region here include Xero or Spirit of Tasmania is probably one of our oldest and longest serving customers. So they are, of course, government owned, but a lot of the money they make now is actually from their own fares. And this year probably excluded.
Yeah. And for context for the audience, Spirit of Tasmania is the ferry that runs between Melbourne and Tasmania, basically. So Victoria and Tasmania, that's a ferry, and it brings in probably around 10% of the visitors to Tasmania come via that ferry.
Yep. And then a couple of others, probably Sanitarium, Fairfax, so really old school Australian brands. And also a few in New Zealand, like Trade Me or New Zealand Post and so on. So it's been in a nice mix, probably a bit more skewed towards consumer businesses, but also heavy B2B who worked in steel and other things where it's multi-million and billion-dollar contracts sometimes.
Yeah, I liked in the beer meetup when you presented, you did use Xero, which is the cloud-based accounting software from New Zealand, amazing piece of software. You did use them as an example of how their prices have changed, the packages and offering, how they've. I did notice in the last couple of years they changed, and I assume you guys were behind that.
Yes, and I think there's more to come. So
yeah,
they're growing. They're growing internationally, and especially if you are fast growing, that's probably what a lot of these businesses listening to this podcast fall into that category. Sometimes you can't see the forest behind the trees, so yes. You're so busy with running the ship. But sometimes some of these decisions and how to mature your offer and your pricing over time is a bit forgotten. And I think there is one of those examples which were almost taken by their own success too much and then did not have the time and bandwidth to work on some of these topics.
Yeah, I think it's an important point that growing businesses often miss. One, because they don't have a lot of expertise in it, which we're hoping to help out with this talk today. But you can go continue the growth, go fast, and just really increase the volume. But if you don't sometimes stop and take a breath and look at your pricing as well, you can be leaving value on the table, because there might be good junctures at which point to either increase prices or your pricing structure so you charge differently. And I think a lot of growing businesses don't think about that, or even just give it a go, have a test and see what a new price point might be.
Exactly. And I mean, a lot of businesses who start and really grow probably faster than they would have thought themselves, they're often so busy keeping the operative side of things going, with supplies coming and the sales channels functioning and actually being able to pump the volume through, that some of those things are afterthoughts. But in the end, what keeps the light on and fuels actually the growth of the business is the profit you make, and not the number of units you sell. I mean, how should you expand your business successfully if you have a margin of 0 on each of the products going out of the door? I mean, then you can't really scale the business either. No,
that's right. And we'll read out a quote here in a minute, but I've got another quote when we talk about why this is important, pricing. But probably the only thing I remember from university was one of my favourite subjects was microeconomics, and I'm sure you would have it. Probably everyone at Simon-Kucher has it tattooed somewhere, that the price elasticity of demand, which I absolutely love the concept of. Getting that price point right, your sales volume, your units might come down, but the price is a little bit higher. So finding that magical price point which gives you the overall greatest gross profit. And I just was blown away with that concept, and particularly the term stuck in my mind.
Yep. No, I agree. And I mean, the credo of a lot of new and fast-growing companies is almost a fail-fast approach from the Silicon Valley. So just do it and then learn fast and get better. I think when it comes to product design, when it comes to channel, when it comes to communication, that's all fine. But on the other side, price is unfortunately a bit of a one-way street. So if you fail fast with a price which was too low, it's very hard to turn that around and get it up again. So there's a bit of caution when it comes to this approach of let's do trial and error, because you can upset a lot of your early customers by going a lot cheaper over time, or the other way around, you might not be able to actually get the price up if you started too cheap, because in the end, the perception is what counts, not the actual price point. And people have you in mind as a cheap guy or as an expensive guy. That is hard to change, even if the actual mathematics and the price levels have already changed.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we're talking about why this is important for a growing small business, pricing, I'll read out this quote. Everyone can start a business, but not everyone can start a profitable business.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the basics. I think there are a lot of people out there with great ideas. Some of them have not really matched their idea with what need of a customer that actually fulfills. Because in the end, the prerequisite to make ever money with any business is that you can fulfill a need a customer can't fulfill elsewhere better. Only if you have got that differentiation, you can really make money out of that, because people are willing to pay for having their needs fulfilled. So I think it probably starts with, first of all, you need to know what you want to achieve. I mean, if you start a non-profit, it's probably fine not to make a lot of money. As long as you don't make a loss, the thing probably is there for a greater good. Second point is probably to see who's actually using your product, and what do they use it for. So to really see what is the benefit of a customer using that product, consuming the product, whatever you offer. And then in the end, if you know what the value is, then you can see what is the best way to charge for it. So I think a lot of companies and especially smaller businesses jump to the conclusion they do it like a competitor. For example, if you have a bottle of beer, you charge a price per box or per bottle or per carton or whatever. But in the end, the value of a certain product might not be only a one-time consumption. It might be also that people have a more regular consumption of a product, or they use it like a subscription model. So if you don't know what the value of this product is, it's hard to define even what is the right price model in the first place, before even thinking about the price level. And then I think another challenge is that the price level is often driven by cost or competition.
Yeah, that old cost up approach. So I'm going to just make 10% on what it costs me to make a widget.
Exactly. And that 10% is unfortunately often arbitrary, because it might be 100% or it might be 5%. Who knows if they are relatively new in what they're doing.
And it's not using the optimal price, which is what the market will bear. That old saying, it's what people are prepared to pay for it.
Exactly. And you might find out they're not prepared to pay enough to actually cover the cost. Then probably the business idea wasn't so great. Or they might pay a multiple of your cost, and then your margin is a few 100%. So I think you have to have cost and competition as guidelines on what you're doing. But if you blindly follow those, you probably leave a lot of money on the table, or you might not be able to sell because people don't see the value in your product to even cover the cost.
Yeah. Do you have that example you used on the Zoom call the other week, which I absolutely loved, was the pricing of the car, which I don't know if you've got that to hand, you can talk to just how much value was potentially left on the table because they were constricted by supply in that year of launch.
Yeah, I mean, it was a time when Audi launched the first SUV, which was a Q7 at the time. And they, in the end, decided or expected that they can't launch this car at a higher price than the BMW X5, which they saw as their main competitor in that segment. So they developed the car, they put all the technology in, they ramped up the production capacity, and then they launched at a price which was just below the X5. And it turned out in the year one, when they launched the car, the demand was much higher than their production capacity. And in the end, that assumption that they have to stay below the competitor was wrong. They could have charged more to actually at least sell out the production capacity and not have more demand than they can fulfill. And I think that little mistake was at the time like 6%, the price was too low. And it was like $400 million loss or lost opportunity.
Yes.
By getting it slightly wrong. So especially if you've got a lot of units of volume, a very small mistake can add up to a very large number. And I mean, that's a nice Christmas party if you have 400 million more profits. So.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And do you have other examples you can, how powerful pricing can be for a business that you can use?
Yeah, I mean, a very classic example is that companies say, I'm in the commodity space, so I cannot charge more than anyone else because it's a commoditized offer I've got. And what I always explain, just look at water. If you get it from the tap, the cost of 1 liter of water is probably less than a cent. If you buy bottled water at the Woolworths or Coles home brand, it's probably $1 a liter.
Yep.
And if you buy this Norwegian Foss water in a glass bottle, which has a fancy shape, it's probably like $10 a liter. So it's still water. I mean, one might come from Norway, the other one comes from the tap, but it's still a very commoditized product. So in the end, the brand, the packaging, and the story around it can lead to a 1,000-fold higher price for the same product. So just because you're commodity or because everybody else seems to do what you're doing doesn't mean you can do it differently. I mean, Apple is another example of, none of the Apple products was probably the first on the market, but a lot of the product they have was better from the usability, from the design, the brand was strong. So they could charge a lot more than some of the early competitors with products which were technically not so much better. So in the end, it's more than just looking left and right and saying, this is what I'm restricted by. There are a lot of ideas.
Yep. Before we move on to what people do really poorly in this area, any other examples you want to talk to or main points around why this is important?
Unfortunately, there are a lot of challenges where we see with growing businesses that they start with very customized offers in the beginning. Of course, if you've got the first 5, 10, 50 customers, you have the bandwidth to do that, and you're really close to the customer and you really want to do the best for them. But once the business scales, you have to really find the inflection point where you cannot do every offer or every product or every price custom, because otherwise it just blows out the ops in the background.
Yeah.
So I think that's a common mistake. A lot of founders of businesses do not value their own time sufficiently.
Yes.
So sometimes people drive at night to do deliveries themselves for free or so. I mean, in the end, if you would work in an executive job somewhere else, what is your hourly rate?
Yep.
And if you do stuff yourself, even as a founder, do not undervalue your own time and your own intellect. That's a common thing. And then I think not understanding really the customer value is often the issue, that they really go back to proxies like price of the competitors or other proxies which are just not suitable. It's hard to measure value. That's a challenge, but if it would be easy, of course, everybody would be great at pricing.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, before we move on to the final few questions, the final three, anything else you want to talk about? Any other examples?
Yeah, I think probably one other thing to highlight is really the decision on the right price model or metric. I think there are too many default decisions that people say, just because I'm software, I have to do subscription. Just because I'm consumer good, I have to do a price per unit. We worked years ago when I was still in the head office in Europe on a project for a railway company. At that time, a lot of the low-cost airlines started in Europe, and rail travel was considered whatever. On the one side, a poor man's choice because the service was bad.
Yep.
On the other side, it was considered quite expensive because if you want to go 500 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers with a train, it would cost more than the plane and take a lot longer. So actually, was a product category which was almost doomed. And what we did for that rail operator is we said, why are people not traveling more? Because the price perception is that it's an expensive service, and they can't anticipate really how much they travel in every year. They use the car or they use the train, the plane. So what we did, we offered is some type of subscription for a train, but it was not like pay 2,000 euros and get as many train travels as you want, because then a few heavy users would benefit and most other people would say that's far too much. I never use that much a train. What we did, we had an annual membership. I think it was like 200 euros. And then after that, every train trip is half the price.
Great.
Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of people signed up to that because they said, oh, if I just do 2 trips a year, it's already worth it. And then they used a lot more the train than other modes. So a lot of traffic came back. And of course, from a revenue perspective, you had out of these, a few million people who bought the membership, a 200 euros upfront fee, but you can invest in service and stuff like that. So it was probably one of the oldest businesses like rail service, a complete new price model, which actually helped them to compete against the planes, the cars, and made them a lot of money on top.
And how did you come about that? Did you do a lot of testing before, obviously, they rolled that out?
Yeah, I think when it comes to defining the actual price points and so on, yes. But in the end, we knew that at that point, you had to do a step change, just fiddling around on the edges on saying there are some discounts if you drive on the weekend or some other specials or increase the price per kilometer or decrease. That wouldn't have made the trick. You had to really a game change. And at that time, a 50% off for something which was considered expensive what made actually the trick. If you do the math, probably most of the people would have paid somewhat similar to what they did before because they didn't consider in every decision the $200 upfront. But again, that's a price perception thing.
Yeah.
And just the feeling that you could rock up at any time or to any railway station, buy a ticket, and that's half price, was already a good feeling. Even if you probably wouldn't use the train that year at all, people still renewed their membership because they might use it.
Yes.
And then they take a huge advantage.
Yeah.
So it's also a lot of it has to do with behavioral economics on these things, and you do market research, of course, but a lot of the things is also how people decide in their daily decision making when to buy a product or not.
Yeah, one of my favorite books, I'm sure you've read it, is Influence by Robert Cialdini, behavioral psychology, effectively, and consumer psychology, and there's some great case studies in there of how he himself has even been influenced and tricked by what he calls compliance officers, and just the pricing and some of the Toy Story, the toy manufacturer is a great one that he couldn't believe that he got stung by it. But it is amazing how powerful it can be if you can understand why humans make decisions certain times, and then obviously not just in pricing but also advertising and marketing. You can use that science and that understanding to get better outcome.
Yes.
So when we spoke at the beer meetup, I asked you how the perpetual discounting of a brand like Kathmandu, the outdoor clothing adventure company here in Australia and New Zealand, how they could get away with it, just always seem to be on discount, offering discounts, and how that hasn't eroded the value of the brand in the consumer's mind. And it's clearly is a successful pricing model for them.
Yeah, I think when it comes to discounting, that's a double-edged sword. So I think there are certain categories, and definitely fashion is one of them, where people expect to have regular discounts. I mean, it's a season sales, it's a stock take sale, whatever the creative names are for it. And it's part of the overall price setting. I mean, if you plan your pricing like your shelf price is actually 20% higher than you would think is the optimum, and then you always give 20-25% discount, probably you end up with a net price where you need to be. Mm-hmm. But people still have the impression they always make a bargain. I think you can exaggerate it. There are some brands, I think probably the most famous example in Australia is Oxford, the menswear brand. Mm-hmm. I think you don't walk past a shop where it's not 50, 60, 70% off. I mean, then it's getting unrealistic. Yeah. I mean, nobody ever bought a shirt for $200 there because it's never more than $70 anyways. Yeah. So I think if you fall over the almost the optimal point on that, it's really probably brand damaging. On the other side, a lot of the promotion discussion depends on really optimizing the detail. We work for some consumer goods companies. Like one of them is one of the larger chocolate brands here, and based on how long it is, how deep it is, where it's positioned in the store, there's very different impacts. So you might be able that with a 2-week 20% off, you can achieve more than with a 4-week 30% off. And it's a lot of these parameters play together. And unless you can really analyze and forecast what's the impact, you might run the same thing again because you ran it last year. And then in the end, it doesn't work anymore because everybody knows what's coming. Yeah. And they would never buy full price ever anymore because they know whatever next week is 20% off everything again. Yeah.
Well, I've got a great story around that. When I did my scholarship at university, I was working at Hitachi Data Systems in Melbourne, and I went to a data warehousing seminar, and someone got up and spoke from a big company in the US. I'm assuming it was Walmart. They didn't say who it was. And this is 1995. So data mining was really just coming into the fore then in the 90s. So taking a shitload of data across SKUs and as much demographics as you can get from your customers, and then mining the data for patterns to see what you can bear out of that to then put sales campaigns and marketing and advertising together. And I was blown away when he told this story of this massive chain in the US, probably Walmart's, where head office gave instruction at Easter time to clear the shelves of chocolates and only put up Easter egg, the Easter chocolates. And there were quite a few recalcitrant store managers that, told the head office where to go. No, we're not going to do that. So there was enough of a sample size after the first year of this new policy came in. Someone noticed when they were looking through the data that there were enough stores that didn't follow head office cues. So they ran a campaign over it, had a look at the data, and they were blown away because it sounds counterintuitive, but those stores that were recalcitrant and had both traditional chocolate bars on the shelves and Easter eggs sold more of both categories than the ones that followed head office and just cleared the shelves and put Easter egg chocolates. The Easter egg chocolates sold more in the stores that had them both on the shelf. And so obviously from then on, they were able to then make that decision from Easter's on, all stores to have them both.
Yeah. No, again, and that's probably good luck that at that time, first of all, they didn't have the data to know it beforehand, and that some store managers obviously had the right gut feel, because that's another thing in retail. I think there are a lot of head office decisions where the people on the ground are not involved. And even if you can't do a large customer survey because you don't have the time or resources, if you do a survey among your retail employees, you might already get a very good read on what's happening out there. Yeah. And again, also data can only show you what happened in the past. It will not tell you what you have never tried before. Yeah. So if you've done everything wrong the last 20 years, the data will not show you anything better because that's what you did. So that's sometimes a bit the misbelief. Just because you have a lot of data, it will show you a lot. But first of all, you need to know what to look for. And if you've never really tried anything or changed anything in the past, it doesn't show any reactions or any sensitivity. So it's one of the elements. If you want to do optimal pricing, you look at what the data shows you, what the customer gives you as a feedback, and what common sense and behavioral economics and so on tell you. And if you put those three together, you come up with a good solution. Only data will not guide you, and only customer research probably neither.
Yeah. Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course and add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager. Great. We're on to our final few questions here. What do you think is the hardest thing in pricing products or services for a growing small business?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things is the benefit of a small business is to be close to the customer, but that's also part of the hardest thing because they take too many customer feedbacks too literally.
Yeah.
And, for example, start fiddling around with the product because a few customers didn't like this, that, and the other, but it might not be representative of the broader masses. On top of it, customers will always complain about your prices. That's how it is. And honestly, it's the other way around. If they don't complain, then you're in trouble because then it's a sign that you're too cheap.
Yes.
So if you, after every complaint on price, you start running promotions or give them a special discount, then it's probably you're not in a good negotiation position because unless they complain, you're too cheap.
Yep. And Chris, what's your opinion on loyalty programs like supermarkets use and even the airlines when it comes into pricing and that price perception helping prop prices up, I guess? Do you think they're an effective tool if a small business is considering, running a loyalty program, if it's relevant for them?
Yes, I think in general, yes, but there are a lot of differences by program. I wouldn't even call something like a Coles or Woolworths program a loyalty program. I would call it a data collection program.
Yeah.
Because in the end, if everybody has a card of both big players anyways, it's not loyalty. They use both anyways. And some of those programs, you have to shop thousands of dollars to get whatever, a pen or something. So they're not that attractive. I think there are others. If you look at Qantas, I think a lot of the current situation that they are still in survival mode is because of the big profit they make out of their loyalty scheme. Yeah. I think if you look back, probably best practices, there used to be the SPG program of Starboard hotels before they were swallowed by Marriott.
Yeah, I'm a member of that program. Yep.
They were considered as one of best in class when it comes to, let's say, the right balance between earning and spending. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, you need to know, first of all, know what you want to do. You want to acquire people with that instrument. You want to keep them. You want to upsell them. Mm-hmm. And then based on that, you have to design the program around that. What are the earning mechanisms? What are the spending mechanisms? Is, for example, tenure rewarded? If you reward tenure in a life insurance, probably not smart because people stay anyways. Yeah. If you reward tenure in another product, it might be good because people swap otherwise every year. Yeah, like car insurance or something. So it's really the devil is in the detail. And I think if it's designed correctly, it's quite helpful. And it doesn't have to be a high-tech thing. I mean, sometimes the thing you get in the coffee place where you stamp 10 times and then you get a free coffee. That's quite effective and easy to implement. So you don't have to spend millions of dollars to participate in Qantas or set up your own thing. Yep. Do something. And sometimes just talking to customers or writing them an email, happy birthday, not giving them anything is already enough. You don't need to go overboard with throwing money at them. Yeah, that's a good point. Look for things that are of high perceived value but low economic cost for yourself to do, like just sending a happy birthday on a customer's actual birthday. It can create a lot of goodwill. Yeah. Favorite pricing book you'd recommend for small business owners to be reading? I think that there are two. There's a very practical one, which is called Monetizing Innovation. I've just added that to my list the other day, actually. Yeah. I think it's a bit more skewed towards gig economy and tech. Yeah. But a lot of the whatever processes and frameworks are applicable to any business. The main more or less advice is think about the value before you design the product. So not design something and try to find somebody who wants it, to go the other way around. try to find a need and then design the product.
Yep.
And if it's a more bit of a textbook thing, something you wouldn't read unless you've got really sleepless nights, but something you can really look up stuff, probably price management from our founder.
Mm-hmm.
That's used at various business schools and so on as a pricing book. And that's something if you want to look at cross price elasticity between different products, how do I calculate that or stuff like that.
Yep.
It's always good to have it on the shelf. But again, you wouldn't read it from page 1 to the end, unless you're really a pricing geek.
And the author's full name, so we'll add that to the show notes, and so people can.
Our founder is Professor Herman Simon.
Right, great.
And the monetizing innovation is from also one of our guys, Madhavan Ramajulian.
Yes, great, thank you. Final question: what is the one thing you would say to a small business owner starting out in their growth journey on day one around pricing?
Yeah, I think the one thing is always check whatever you do, what value it creates to your customers and how you can capture it. So do not spend your time and effort on nice to have things where people say that's a hygiene factor. If you really put a lot of effort into product development, new features, new packaging and so on, know what the additional value is before you actually invest anything. Otherwise you sit there with the cost, but you don't get any more revenue out of it.
Yep. Great advice. What are some tools and methods you would recommend to small business owners to use around pricing?
Cool. I think for a lot of small businesses, you don't have to go overboard with pricing software or anything. I think if you set up an Excel tool where you really know what is your profit, revenue, cost, how is it made up out of volume and price? What do you think would happen to volume if your price changes up or down? Some kind of a small simulation, and then use this as a basis. First, probably with assumptions, then with actually some data you collect after you change some prices, so that you're not navigating in the fog, but you have a model where you can say what would happen if, and then you see what's the worst case. Or if you reduce the price, what is the required volume to ever make the same margin again? So unless you have some of these very basics right, and that's what probably takes half an hour to put into Excel, that's probably almost a bit of a cheat sheet.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Chris, because often business owners particularly will project, they'll say, well, I wouldn't pay that for my product or service, and you are often not your customer. And secondly, if you don't go out and test and get data and validate your assumptions, either your bad ones and kill them off, or validate the good ones, you're flying blind. And a good friend of mine that owns a tech company, they often do A/B testing on their pricing, which I found was amazing. They get millions of customers come along each year, and they will split them and test under one price point, which is great. You can do that these days with SaaS-based businesses, online companies. And another cohort gets a different price or pricing structure, and they see which of the two performs best and then implement that rolling forward.
Yeah. And even in an offline world, if you are in multiple regions, you can put a few stores aside, run a new promotion or whatever you have in mind, and then have a control group of others. As long as the assortment and the volumes were comparable before, it doesn't mean whatever you decide you have to do nationally. So
yes,
you can do it stepwise.
Yeah, great.
And I think the last point on tools and methods is probably how to identify the customer value, which is always a tricky part. And the easiest is to ask your customers, but don't ask them what they want, because then they want everything, and don't ask them what they want to pay, then they want to pay nothing.
Well, that old Henry Ford quote, if I'd have asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yeah. Or what color, as long as it's black. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I think if you ask customers in the right way of having a trade-off between this is what you get, this is what you pay, and different variations of that, you can come very close to how they would decide, and not ask them how important is it that the thing can eat the rubbish off the street, and what would you pay for it. That's how you then come up with over-engineered products, which are so complicated that nobody would buy it or pay for it.
Yeah, so pricing in itself obviously is a real skill and expertise, but also burrowing down into the data to get the right data so you make informed decisions. So that starts with asking the right questions in the right way, so you're not leading them down a certain path. So, and I'm assuming both those books you've mentioned will be able to give the audience a bit of insight into that much needed skill. Yeah, great. Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Troy.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.